All right, now let's talk about today's episode. I want to introduce you to today's guest, Beth Weinstein, a spiritual business coach who uses neuroscience-backed methodologies, body-based somatic therapy, spiritual teachings, and practical business strategies to help her clients grow their businesses and align their purpose. Now, one thing that's very interesting about Beth is how she works with plant medicines, such as psychedelics with her clients, which is something that I'm keen to chat about. So, Beth, I am so excited you're here today. Thank you so much for jumping on this episode with me.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm glad you're excited to hear about all this.
Oh, hell yeah. Oh, hell yeah. So I gave a very quick introduction to who you are. What I want to do is to go ahead and share with us a little more details around your background, as well as your journey with starting your business.
Oh man, what a journey. Yeah, so my background, I was actually just telling Christabel how I had traveled to Singapore back in my old corporate America days. But so I was raised in America by a very traditional American family that was like, you go to college, you get a job, you work there the rest of your life, and then you die. And that's what I was taught to believe in. And from a father who had like a corporate job that was safe and secure back in those days. And so, but it was interesting when I was a little kid, I used to play this game with my best friend, and we used to call it City, where we lived in cities and we were both entrepreneurs and we both had these businesses, and we used to fly all over the world on these like pretend, we used to use her lawn chairs as like airplanes. And we were these like successful businesswomen who lived these like amazing lives traveling all over. And since then, at that very young age, I knew I was meant to be an entrepreneur. I didn't really know what it meant at that age. I just knew I was here to work for myself. Or I used to say, well, I want to be like the person behind the person in charge. Like, I want to be the one that helps grow the business, but not necessarily the business person. But I never knew what it meant until I got older. But I did the whole like go to college and get a job thing, and did what was safe, like got the first corporate job that was offered to me, and I was like, well, whatever, I just need money. And I went that route. But I remember, even at that very young age, they would ask you these on these corporate interviews, where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? And I used to say, well, I want my own business. And I'm not making this up. One day on one of these interviews, someone said to me, you really shouldn't say that because we want you to stay here and we don't want you to go start your own business. And I was like, oh my God. Like, it didn't even occur to me not to tell them that I wanted a business, because back then, like, they wanted to hear you lie and say, I want to build my whole career at this company. So I knew, even though I took corporate America route for many, many years, I knew that was not my destiny. Like, I just didn't know what this business was that I wanted to do. And then after a series of events, long story short, I was always on a pretty deep spiritual path since I can remember, since I was a kid. I studied psychology in college. My original intention was to become a therapist. And then I didn't feel like going to school for another, whatever it was, 8 years. So, I just kind of took this easy route to corporate. But then there was just a lot happening later on in my life where my dad suddenly got sick. Things were not going very well. I lost him. And then I was working a job that I really didn't like. And I kind of was like, where is this going? What am I doing with my life? Like, really questioning, like, what is life all about? Is this what it's supposed to be? Is that I work 12-hour days to make like a decent living, to be miserable all the time, to then die later? Like, I really thought, like, is this what it is? And after losing my dad, I really started getting deeper into these questions of like, what is this all about? And then, because my dad died pretty unexpectedly, and it was younger than he should have died. Like, he could have had another 20 more years. But so then, in around like 2009, 10, when I was questioning all this, I was working for a company, and I actually didn't mind the job, but it was kind of going nowhere. And I really started questioning, like, what is life all about? They laid me off after they got bought out. And it was the first time where I knew, and I actually was like, oh, I hope I lose my job one day. Like, I really hope I lose my job, because I knew that I needed to like hit the reset button, make some changes. And so the day they laid me off, I booked this like around the world trip and took a few months off. I went to like India and Vietnam and Southeast Asia and all over. And I really questioned, what do I want for the rest of my life? And so when I came back and I had this like weird epiphany in Mumbai on the back of a tuk-tuk, because I was also working in the apparel industry, and I was like, oh, like I can't be doing this anymore. It doesn't really even align with my values. You know, if I do fashion, I want it to be something that aligns with who I really am and, you know, everything I believe in. So I said to myself, like, I'm going to make some changes when I get back. So I actually went to work for early stage tech startups. Like I made this total career change. And then I had started a business with this girl that I was introduced to. It was her business idea, and a friend put us together. And during that, it was something I actually didn't care at all about. It was actually a medical scrubs company. And I was like, I don't care about medical scrubs. But I started to feel the feeling of like, wow, entrepreneurship is fun. Like, this is what I'm here for. Like, I knew, I was like, I got the bug. And so I worked with her on that, and we actually ended up like not even really taking it anywhere. And then I started consulting for these early stage tech startups. And then a friend of mine who is this highly successful entrepreneur, he's like, oh, I'm starting another business. Why don't you come and like run it for me? So I actually went and did that. I helped like launch his business. And during all this, I was like, wait a second, I'm helping all these other entrepreneurs launch and grow, but I'm just being paid like chump change. And none of them were ever my own visions. Like they were fun, you know, I liked them, but they were never my passion. And so when I helped him launch this business of his, which technically I actually still own like 1% of this company and it still exists, I was like, why am I doing his passion? Like I actually didn't really like the industry it was in. And so then, you know, over these years, I had been thinking about, so I took up running like big time. I was in New York City and I was always an athlete and I was looking for alternatives to getting drunk every single night, like most New Yorkers do. So I started really getting involved in the New York City running community and like doing these running groups. And then I started running marathons and like became just really big into athletics and running. And during that whole time, I kept thinking about how the clothes that were being made, and this is like way back when, were not really aligned with my values either. Like, why am I only able to buy from these like 10 corporate brands? And back then, they didn't make anything like cool for people that lived in the city. And they also didn't have anything sustainable. Everything was just like cheap crap. And, you know, so I had all these visions of like how to make things different. And I kept thinking about this business idea. I kept saying, like, I can make a better short than this. Like I had been doing product development and production, and I knew this whole process to making garments. So I kept dreaming of like a better running apparel brand. And it started like eating me away, like at my soul over the years. Like, and I had been thinking about it almost 8 years when it finally got to this point of like everything came together at once. I had been helping other people start their business. I had been thinking about this other clothing brand. I had been thinking of going back and getting these like corporate jobs, but I like dreaded, you know, like my stomach would get sick when they made me a job offer. So I finally got to this breaking point in life where I said, if I don't give this a try, I will like never be able to live again with my soul. You know, it was like eating me alive. So I started this running apparel business kind of just for fun. Let me see how it goes, like no attachments. While I was also helping all these other early stage tech startups grow and scale their businesses. And my business actually ended up taking off at the same time I had lost a bunch of consulting jobs. So it got to that point of like, you know what, now or never, like I'm going to go for it. So I went for it. And over the years of running that business and helping these early stage startups grow, I kept getting people constantly asking me like, hey, will you talk to me about how you started your business? Hey, can you tell me like the tricks? Hey, can you have coffee with me? Can you do a phone call with me? And like, I'm telling you, it wasn't just friends. It was becoming like random strangers from like LinkedIn or like, you know, friends. And I would say yes to everybody. And finally, after a few years, I was like, God, people are constantly asking me for help with my business. And then friends of mine started saying things like, well, Beth, you should just become a career coach. You should just teach this to people. And I was like, nah, like, what do you, I didn't even know there was such a thing as a business coach. And I was like, huh, you know, and I was like, no, I'm just helping people because I love it. But then what started happening is I would run into people like a year later, 2 years later, and be like, hey, how's that business going? And they're like, oh, I never launched it, or I tried and then I like got stuck and I just gave up. And I remember being like, not only disappointed, but kind of pissed off. Like, I had a 3-hour coffee with you and then you couldn't even like start it. What? Like, how hard? But for me, I basically spent my whole career like doing that. So for me, it was actually very easy to launch a business. For most other people, they just got stuck and couldn't figure things out. So I finally said to myself, because I also got really busy with my own business, and I was like, I can't keep saying yes to all these people, especially, all this time I'm giving. So I said to myself, the next time someone asks me, I'm going to make them work with me for at least a few months and I'm going to make them pay me so they actually get results. And that's actually how I got my first coaching client, even though I didn't even know what I was, I didn't know it was coaching. And from there, it kind of just started taking off through me helping people I knew and through me realizing, wow, I didn't know that people who ran businesses don't know what they're doing, or people who want to start businesses have zero idea. I just assumed everyone knew as much as I did. But I had been lucky where I had done this for so long, and I had always had like one of my best friends is this like seriously successful entrepreneur. So that's how I like fell into business coaching. And then I was running my apparel business for a few years while starting up the coaching business. And it kind of got to a point a few years ago where I said to myself, like, first of all, my joy wasn't really in the apparel business anymore. I was really getting sick of talking about the same thing over and over and over. And this business, my coaching business, was growing really fast. And it was so much more aligned with who I was, like my soul on a deeper level. So I finally like let the apparel business kind of die out and put it to rest a few years ago. And voila, of course, ever since I did that, it like this business exploded even more. And that's kind of the whole journey. But it was a series of these like, weird synchronistic events and like kind of paying attention, kind of listening. And, looking back, I look back at how much I always say, like, don't make the mistake I made. Don't wait 8 years to start something. Cause I was really stuck in like the fear of like, how could I do this? But had I done it 8 years earlier, it would have been so much better,
Yeah. Yeah. That's super interesting. And what's cool as well is your background and, with the endurance industry, the endurance sports, but now you also work with plant medicine, such as psychedelics with your clients, which is totally something that is so different from a lot of business coaches out there. So I guess what kind of plant medicines or psychedelics do you actually incorporate in your coaching?
Yeah. Well, then there's that. So it's interesting. I started working with psychedelics very early on, like
Mm-hmm.
14 years old. And then, I studied psychology in college and was always kind of on this path of mental and consciousness inquiry. And throughout this whole journey that I just mentioned, I was getting kind of deeper on that path as well, which I do believe wakes up something in you, which I've done actually a whole bunch of series and talks about this idea of, waking up your truest path, like your true purpose, your essence. So essentially, so I don't give psychedelics to anybody. I don't tell my clients to go do them. But what I started noticing, because I was very deep on this path for many years, I kept it kind of hush hush for a long, long time. Like only certain people and my friends knew, but not out in the public eye. And I really didn't talk about it that much in my business. But then um, a while ago, like 5 or 6 years ago, I got this client, I'm based in the US. I got a client who was based in Australia. And she had also worked with ayahuasca, which I work with in addition to others. And I remember working with her and really loving this, having a client that could speak to me openly about it, who I could speak to openly, who also, was dealing with this idea of, working with these medicines, opening her up to these like new ideas, or like, maybe I should be doing this, or I want to start this business, and not really having anybody to help integrate these visions or these experiences into her real life, meaning like her work, her business, her career. And what I started noticing, I work with ayahuasca and psilocybin and some other things occasionally. And just being around these communities for many, many years, what I started noticing is people would sometimes have these really powerful psychedelic experiences and maybe wake up to like realize, I hate my job as a whatever it is, like an attorney, but I really want to do art for a living, just making this up. And I would see this happen a lot, but the missing link that I kept seeing where I was like, wow, why is no one talking about this, was that they would have these powerful experiences, but then they would just go right back to their day-to-day life. And it was like as if nothing was changing. And I'm like, well, why are you doing all this deep level work on yourself? Like, this work is not really like entertaining either. It's actually very like hard sometimes. They would do all these like deep, including like other meditation or, spiritual work, chanting, whatever it was. But then nothing would actually shift in them. They would know they want to shift, but nothing would actually shift. And I was like, they just need some help. So I started noticing this for a few years where I always make this joke about the people that either drink a lot of ayahuasca and go back to their life that they hate, or they drink a lot of ayahuasca and then they completely quit everything and decide to quit their job, and they go give up everything they own, and then they get a guitar and go sit on a mountaintop for 2 years. But then they realize like, I need to like come back to real life, because neither way, like both extremes aren't really working for them, right? Like it's not about checking out of life completely, but it's also not about living this life that you hate. And that's where I was like, people need help integrating this depth of work into things like their business, things like what path are they on, what's their career, because I mean, this especially here in the Western world, and I'm sure where you're from in Singapore, this is a very common thing too, where a lot of us were raised to believe like you just go, like me, like go to work, get this job and stay there until you die. But when you start having these deeper level awakenings and awareness of yourself and who you are and what you're feeling in your heart, after a while you can't deny that like you're unhappy or you're misaligned, or like with me, I was like, I'm working for companies that are like polluting our entire planet, and there I am like living this very trying to live a very sustainable like green lifestyle. And I was like, well, wait a second, like there's a misalignment here. So when I started my running apparel, it was actually a sustainable clothing brand as well. So that's where I help a lot of clients of mine who are on this path already, who I think what I found missing in the industry is they wanted someone who gets it, right? Like they want someone who understands what they've been going through. And a lot of my clients also are now thinking of how they can incorporate psychedelics into their businesses. So psychedelic integration coaching, which is kind of this new thing that hasn't really been around that long, or people like I have coaching clients that are like life coaches or leadership coaches who are like, well, I want to be able to work with my clients on like microdosing or working with your depression, anxiety, or your trauma, and then also adding in like psilocybin journeys. Or I actually have 2 clients that are like death doulas working with like end of life care and like want to work with psilocybin, where now it's actually been decriminalized and legalized in Oregon. And it was actually made, the whole movement was for this idea of like end of life, like end of life care with the addition of psychedelics to help you through this process, So it's interesting how things are changing so quickly. So I felt like, okay, there's a need for people who get it, who also need to talk seriously about like how to make a business out of this, because it's not just,
Yeah.
okay, go crazy with psychedelics. It's like, how do we actually turn it into something that benefits humanity? Like, and that's where I just came in and started speaking very publicly about this.
Yeah, so can we talk about that? Because that's super interesting, like
Yeah.
how you mix your business advice with this part, plant medicine. How do you actually like how does your coaching program look like? I just got to ask you that. How does it look
Yeah.
like right now? Like how do you talk about here's how you do your business plan. Here's how you get your audience. And then here's how you also
Yeah.
incorporate plant medicine.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, and I know this very well because I went through this as well. So most of my clients are they're either newer entrepreneurs or they're people who are shifting their current businesses. So I have a lot of like acupuncturists or body workers or yoga teachers who want to then add in like coaching or healing or kind of additional like psychedelic work. The biggest issue that they face, which I faced as well, is and this isn't just psychedelics. This is a lot of people on a spiritual path as well, where they are scared of being seen out there. Like they're scared of the judgment because it's still kind of like taboo and it's not legal everywhere yet. And what will people think? What will my family think? How am I going to talk about this without getting in trouble? Are people going to think I'm crazy or weird? Like I went through this. It took me about 2 years to finally start being comfortable with it, because I literally thought, okay, all my friends are going to disown me. I thought the authorities would show up at my door. I thought I would be blocked on Facebook, day one. And honestly, like nothing's really happened. I've only had a couple like weird things happen, but that's happening to a lot of people on Facebook right now. So it's the depth of going through this experience of coming out of this spiritual closet or coming out of the psychedelic closet, or even my clients that are like coming out as a life coach. It's still a deep journey to go from, I don't know, being a corporate salesperson to then talking about what's been hiding inside of them all these years. So that's a big part of my program, is actually just the depth and that mindset. But of course, learning how to speak to your potential clients, learning how to communicate, learning how to share your own story so that it resonates with your potential clients. Of course, this isn't all the marketing, but I actually bring in a lot of I don't know what to even call it, like holistic aspects of business. Like I do go over mindset a lot. We actually do, my partner is he's a core energetics therapist, which is a deep level form of somatic therapy where it addresses the energy that's stored inside the body. So that's actually part of my program, is going deep into like the body and your energy and like the blocks, the internal blocks, physical, energetic. And then, like clearing, I do believe in this idea of clearing your own inner channel, meaning like we're all here to just be, like allow what comes through us, right? And if you're blocked with fears or doubts or I don't know, something that happened to you 20 years ago that got you really scared, that could stop you for so long. Like that can actually, I've seen so many people like where if they don't work on this deeper level, like mindset and seeing things differently and addressing things that have happened that are stopping them from moving forward, they can't really be successful in their business. So this is a huge part of what I teach as well, is like really how to come from that place in your heart that knows you're here for a deeper level, like reason. Like you aren't just, here to be a healer because you want to make money. Like you're here to be a healer because of some path that you've been on or something that's been pulling you. It's the same thing with coaching. It's like, there's a million other ways to go make money than coaching. Like, of course, but why is it that you're feeling called to help people? And that's where you have to pay attention to this deeper level of what's coming through you and what's in your heart, and like why helping someone with their purpose versus why not helping them, I don't know, with like training their dog, So you really have to get deep into that beyond the marketing. Like of course I teach the basics, like how to start and grow and automate your email list, how to create your own audience, how to market, how to communicate, how to attract in the clients, how to price, package, and structure, like all the masculine like structuring of your business. Of course that's needed because you have to have that. But then this other work is really where it's at. Like I'm like, you guys, you cannot be what you want to become if you're just so stuck on like, let's say one limiting belief that's holding you back for you. It could hold people back for years.
Oh yeah.
Or even, and this is what you teach. So it's like, you have to address this deeper level work.
Oh, absolutely. And I totally agree with you. And I think right before we went live, I mean, basically, this is the reason why this entire podcast exists, right? Because we're trying to go deeper into entrepreneurship than just the more marketing stuff, the business advice and all that stuff. And that's why we've taken this whole new direction, and we're talking about mindset. We're talking about things like psychedelics. We're talking about things like health and body and all that stuff on top of the business part. That is absolutely what we're doing. I'm so like,
Yeah.
we're so in line with that. For my listeners who are entrepreneurs and they're like, oh yeah, I want to tap into the power of psychedelics. I want to test it out. What would you say are some things you got to be probably aware of, or be careful of as they are diving and testing out this new aspect of getting more aligned and more aware of their subconscious and their vision and their future
Mm.
and all that stuff?
Yeah, this is a big one. So first things first, actually, my partner has a whole blog post about this, how psychedelics I don't think are for everyone. There's actually certain people out there with certain levels of like traumas, and it's actually comes back to like a whole archetype of a person. Psychedelics can actually make people worse, some people, right? I don't even get into that. That's like what my partner gets into. It's pretty deep stuff. But so it's first things first. It's not a fix all for anybody. But if you're called to this path, or you're already on the path, or you want to go deeper, a lot of people are like, I tried mushrooms in college or at Burning Man. But what I say is really, first of all, set your intention to be guided to the right teacher or the right group or the right whatever it is, like shaman or leader or whatever. Like, I'm not a fan, and this is just me personally, of jumping into things without really knowing what you're getting into, because even though most of them are safe, there's also very dangerous, ones, especially if you're, let's say you're on an antidepressant, there are certain things you're not supposed to do, or else it can actually kill you. So just know the depths of safety, like safety first, meaning you have to be very aware of like the risks. And of course, then there's benefits. But so I always say, look, if you meet someone who's not asking you about your medical history and what you're taking and your own like intentions, I personally wouldn't do it with them. If you want to just do something on your own, like sure, you can. Again, like for your first few times, I don't recommend just doing things by yourself. Not unless you're at like, maybe Burning Man is the only place where I'm like, that's a very safe place to do whatever you want by yourself, because there's a million people around you who get it. But besides then, like, there's not many places I can think of where I feel like it's safe to just like jump in. But that's me personally. I tend to be one of these people that only work with psychedelics for the most part in a kind of a sacred setting, meaning like there's an intention, there's a ceremony, there's a set and setting created with music, with good people, with a, like there's a lot of people who say like it's actually like a prayer, it's not just for you and your trip, it's deeper than that. It's for, the whole. That's what I like to do. Yes, of course, sometimes I microdose, and sometimes the days of festivals, like I'll take a little like for fun, but generally there's always, for me, there's always some kind of an intention. And I actually do believe that's very important, because it gives you the most benefits back. So depending on what your intention is, and for some people, it could just be like, hey, I want to stop being depressed. Like there's people doing psychedelics for like anxiety, depression, PTSD. There's some people that just want to like expand and see what it's like. That's fine. There is no right or wrong. But that's just the way I like to do it. I would say, also really, I always say go through trusted people, like friends, or people you really feel like you trust. But here's the reality: I've gone through friends that I trust and had really bad experiences. So there's also just the knowing. And I try to take this like Buddhist path of like non-judgment, of like who's to say what's good or bad. Like there is no, oh, this is the only way or the right way. It's all in you figuring out what works for you. Meaning, I've been doing this stuff since I was a teenager, and now I'm in my 40s. I've definitely had some really bad experiences, and it sucks, and I learned my lesson. But the good news is I've learned, okay, I'm not going to do that like this in this place ever again. And sometimes, in a way, I always say, like, some people, you kind of have to just go through it. Another thing to know is these are not, for the most part, they're not always fun. Like if anything, they're majority not fun. Um, so ayahuasca, even psilocybin, yes, there are moments that are amazing and mind blowing and beautiful, but for the most part, it's actually, they call it like work. Like it's depths of, some nights can be very, like hard. I mean, even recently, the last time I drank ayahuasca was actually in Costa Rica. And I always think like, oh, I'm gonna just lay around and listen to music and like feel good. And it pounded me. Like I was on my knees and, keeled over for hours, like, barely able to stand. But of course it was amazing, transformative experience. So that's where I always say to people, look, like you have to just be aware of what you're getting into, really be honest with yourself of like what your intentions are, and, do your research. I always ask a lot of questions like, where'd you get this medicine? Like who cultivated it or made it or whatever, like what's in it? That's another thing that people who aren't aware don't know, that there's a lot of like weird things happening now where people are like mixing things, or people are I mean, this has even happened to me where someone gave me a mushroom chocolate, however many, I think it was like 7 years ago, and it was a synthetic and it was not at all mushrooms. It was totally a lie. And I was pissed. And, I knew it was safe. It was just annoying that I was lied to, but I was giving it to someone who got it from someone who got it from someone else who got it from someone else. And I would never do that again. So you just have to know, I guess if you're like one of these adventurous people and you just don't care, like, sure, then you can just take the risk. And if it's great, it's great. If it's not, it's not. But for me, I ask a lot of questions. I always really like to know their lineage too. Like, who have you studied with, or like what, like, especially with something like ayahuasca, where, again, there's a lot of like weird things going on out there, which, to each their own. It might work for some people. It doesn't really work for me, but I always like to know, like, okay, how long have you been doing this? Like, how'd you learn? Like, who made this medicine? What's in it? What kind of ayahuasca is it? Like same with psilocybin. There's like many different strains, like, um, but honestly, in the end, it's one of those things where just be safe, and then the rest is kind of like you live and learn. There's people out there that disagree with me that are like, oh, you should never do this or you have to do that. I don't agree with that, because again, that's a very egocentric way to me of saying like, what works for you is the right way for everybody. It's not true. Like I work with a guy in Peru who's extremely traditional. Like he's a very, like, he's been doing it for, 30 years, and he's kind of, he has his ways. There's other people that like do it a completely different way, and that's okay too. So, I try to really keep the ego and the, like, humans want to be right about their way all the time. And I don't believe in that. The one thing that gets me angry is when people lie or do bait and switch or don't take care of people's physical health, meaning like there's certain things like DMT or even ayahuasca where, like, if you don't do a proper medical intake, someone could actually die in your ceremony. And it doesn't happen much, but it has. And that's where, that's just irresponsible of whoever's doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I feel.
That's a very interesting topic that we've covered today on the podcast. We never talked about this before, psychedelics or even just plant medicine and the use of psychedelics and microdosing and all that. It's very interesting. It's very deep. And so to wrap this episode up, I gotta ask you, like, for people who want to work with you, they want to learn more about you, where can they find you? How can they work with you?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And thank you so much for being open to talking about all
Oh
this.
yeah.
It's a very interesting subject to a lot of people. So I can be found all over the internet at bethaweinstein.com, Facebook, Beth Weinstein, Instagram, Beth A. Weinstein. If you Google me, I kind of just show up, I think. I call myself a spiritual business coach, but I do, also have this kind of psychedelic business coaching thing going on. So I've also hosted a few summits around, if you're curious, actually, they're free. There's some interviews still out there with actually some really big names like Rick Doblin, who's the founder of MAPS, who is actually spearheading this whole entire psychedelic renaissance. So I've run two summits. One's called Psychedelics and Purpose, psychedelicsandpurpose.com, and the other was psychedelicsandbusiness.com. So those are out there. They're free. And yeah, you can just ping me and, let me know if you have any questions.
Love it. All right. Oh, thank you so much, guys, for spending time with me and Beth today. I hope you found the episode very interesting, very enlightening. Don't forget that you can find these show notes, the links, the resources, everything that we talked about on our website at the MindFuel Community, mindfieldcommunity.com. So, Beth, I want to thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Christabel. I appreciate it. And thank you for this work that you're doing. It is so important. This is it.
I'm glad to hear that.
MindFuel, seriously.
Thank you. Thank you.